Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War on the Pacific, Admirals Edition, and our play-by-email game against XTRG. In our last video, we planned an attack at the island of Savi if the Japanese naval forces remain there, and we also have naval vessels about to land on Canton Island, which will be our first counterattack against the Japanese. In addition to that, we're preparing to continue to provide more reinforcements to the island of Fiji, where we're pretty certain the Japanese are about to launch a major attack. In addition to that, we have sallied the battle cruisers Repulse and Prince of Wales to try and get them to escape to South Africa for repairs. XTRG has not been able to destroy either, although he has very badly damaged the Prince of Wales. The Repulse I'm not that concerned about. You saw a little pop-up there about temporary flotation repairs failing, but it's at level 20 flooding, so it's got quite a bit of a buffer. The Prince of Wales, on the other hand, is like 59 or 60 or something like that, so it's much more close to sinking, and the Prince of Wales can only make 7 knots to the Repulse's 14. Meanwhile, you can see here Japanese submarine activity off the island of Fiji. We're not able to really do anything about it. And here we go. We've got the attack of our heavy cruisers, our light cruisers, and our destroyers against a Japanese surface action group off the coast of Savi, one of the islands in the Samoa group, which the Japanese just took, and we need to stop. We need to counter this, and we need to make sure that the Japanese are unable to support this landing force that they pushed way out ahead of their logistical capacity. And frankly, you know, barring if he sends the Kiru Butai around, this is going to be a difficult base for him to do much with. There's no airfield on the base. He didn't send engineers as far as I'm aware, and without engineers, he's not going to be able to turn this into an airbase. It is an island that can host a very large airbase, but without substantial numbers of engineers, it's basically going to be a float plane base, which will give him some valuable intelligence, no doubt. Having float planes this far forward will allow him to basically see, or at least get snippets of our entire resupply effort to the island of Australia, and allow him to perhaps plan out submarine missions or raiding parties. But without the actual land-based air power, he won't be able to interdict those without shipping, and it's going to be very difficult for him to stage shipping this far forward. That's why we're pretty certain his next target is either going to be Pago Pago or Fiji, and my money's on Fiji because it's a much more important base, and the base of Suva on the island of Fiji is worth 300 victory points to the Japanese. So from a gameplay perspective, he gets highly rewarded if he takes the island of Fiji. Meanwhile, these two Japanese ships that we're engaging off of Savi are the CM Tokugawa and the CM Okinoshima. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. But they're two cruiser mine layers, which are very important to the Japanese. This is pretty, it's a pretty good success for us. He was using these guys to support his invasion, but if I was him, I would not be doing that. The Tokugawa is a former armored cruiser, I believe. If you look at it, it has sort of these little bulges here at the midships. I believe those are casemates. I believe this is sort of a World War I or pre-World War I era armored cruiser. The Okinoshima is a little bit more modern looking. But in any event, cruiser mine layers are ships that are specialized in carrying large numbers of mines for laying minefields, which for a base like Savi would be really valuable. If I was trying to retake it, I don't want to have to deal with large numbers of mines, so destroying this is important. Additionally, the Japanese presumably are going to be on the defensive at some point in this war, and when they are on the defensive, they want to be able to lay massive minefields on the islands that we need to try and retake. And these vessels are very good at that. They carry 75, 150 sea mines that he can use to drop in there, and they're also fast, and they're relatively well armored, so they're somewhat invulnerable to like destroyers, but obviously not so much to two heavy cruisers and two light cruisers. So this thing is not in doubt. They haven't hit us once. We've got them both on fire. We've got two heavy cruisers, the Pensacola and the the Louisville, both American heavy cruisers. And then we've got the Leander and the Achilles, which are both, I believe, Australian light cruisers. We saw them in a battle against a Japanese armed merchant cruiser south of Fiji. And then we have the Voyager and the Le Triomphe. The Le Triomphe, I believe, is a New Zealand destroyer. The Voyager might be Australian, or maybe vice versa. I'm not sure. At any event, this is a pretty strong task force, shy of him sending battleships that can probably deal with most threats. And we're going to fast forward here because I think the issue is not in doubt. So we'll just fast forward. You can see the Tokugawa sunk, and the Okashima also sunk. So 39 and 32 shell hits respectively, and both vessels are destroyed. Additionally, we have another surface action going on here. It looks like the Japanese have a cargo ship, which is probably unloading supplies for his forces at Savi. So we'll go ahead and fast forward here, because I'm assuming we'll sink them. A lot of shell splashes and explosions. At the end of the day, the Tinu Maru also sunk. So 3 Japanese ships sunk this turn off the coast of Savi. That's a very good success for that surface action group. Probably like 70 victory points worth or so, which is like a heavy cruiser, I think. So it's a pretty good result there. Meanwhile, we're moving into the air phase. You can see recon over Tarawa. It looks like he's got naval ships off the base of Nehru, which we've got a small base there, basically a defense force that won't be able to stop anything. But it's got also a Catalina that we're flying out of there, which helped us spot last turn, I believe it was, the Kidu Butai at the island group in the Kwajalein area. So presumably he's saying, all right, I don't want your recon flights over my bases, so I'm going to do something about that, and I'm going to take some of these bases. Additionally, they're all very close to Tarawa, which, as you know from World War II history, was an important battle that the Americans fought to take back the island of Tarawa, and he obviously wants to make sure we don't have any bases that close to his. Meanwhile, over Singapore, the Japanese are running sweep missions with some zeros, and we're not opposing them. I think we're going to need to change that. I have allowed him to run unopposed sweep missions over Singapore, which the logic there is I don't want to bleed out my air wings there in dogfights. I want to save my air wings for when he brings his bombers to bear. But frankly, if I keep waiting, eventually he's going to bring bombers in, and they may be able to shut the airbase down in one effective strike before I even get my fighters up. There's no point in having a large airbase there if I'm not willing to defend it. So I do think I need to try and defend it. Additionally, if he's going to keep sending groups like 16 zeros or like 5 Oscars, as I think was last turn, it would be a great opportunity to maybe give him a bit of a bloody nose. You know, maybe we can knock out like 10 of his fighters. Even if we lose 10 or 12 of our own fighters, if we give him a bloody nose where he's like, all right, maybe I need to be a little bit more thoughtful or careful before I fly over Singapore, that might buy us a little bit of time before his inevitable bombing campaign begins against the city and help us out. But I guess we'll see. Meanwhile, you can see here there's an air battle occurring over Clark Field, which is consisting of 11 P-35As, and I forget how many P-26s. These are obsolete fighter aircrafts, although the P-35, I believe, was the spiritual predecessor to the P-47 Thunderbolt. It's a very similar aircraft. It's very maneuverable, just doesn't have the same kind of firepower or armor as the Thunderbolt, I believe. Going against Japanese Nates, which are poorly armed, agile fighters. So these are also members of the Philippine Air Force, I believe. They're not American fighter pilots. You can see there the Japanese didn't lose anything. We lost 2 aircraft. Yep, these are both Filipino squadrons. Filipino Air Force 6th Pursuit Squadron. Maybe this one was American. 35th Pursuit Group. I'm not sure. Meanwhile, more Japanese fighters over Singapore. Well, there's nothing there, so it doesn't matter. On the Malay front, as a reminder, I sent all of my bombers toward Mersing. So we're trying to obliterate the Japanese troops there that are cut off, and we have an attack planned for the afternoon as well. So I've got like 150, 160 aircraft attacking his troops there. Hopefully they're able to batter them into submission, and then our attack goes forward and overruns them. We'll see. Meanwhile, in China, he's bombing near Haichao. I don't have anything there to resist. There's no bases nearby. But I did order some of my fighters over the northern area near Fuchao, because he's been bombing our troops there. And here you can... No. Darn. I thought this was Fuchao. I guess that's Haichao. So I don't have anything there. We're going to lose more casualties. Here's the raid over Fuchao. 17 P-40Bs are intercepting. Air combat done. Thunderstorms over target. Well, I guess the issue is I don't have any radar near this. This isn't a base that gives me radar. And it did say thunderstorms over target. And I think my aircraft are at like 15,000 feet. And, well, they didn't do much damage. Only 24 casualties. He was bombing from 5,000 feet. We were intercepting at 15 and 21,000 feet. So the altitude gap sometimes prevents fighters from engaging, as well as the lack of radar. And the fact that it was a thunderstorm means we probably didn't even see them. They probably flew right by. Kind of like at Midway, where you never really hear about this, but there was a scenario where some Japanese fighters flew, or Japanese recon planes flew directly over the American carriers earlier in the day and didn't see them because there was so much cloud cover. All right, so you can see here we've got almost 50 fighter aircraft strafing the Japanese troops at Mersing, but they're not just strafing. It does say strafing, but these aircraft actually carry bombs as well. So they strafe with their machine guns at 100 feet, but they also drop 100-pound bombs from the Buffaloes, and I think the P-40s also, or these aren't P-40s, these are H-81s. So it looks like the Buffaloes drop 100-pound bombs, and the H-81s just strafe. Meanwhile, a second raid here of bombers made up, and it looks like there's also heavy rain over the targets, so we probably won't do much damage here. This raid consisted of 31 aircraft and only inflicted 8 casualties. Again, the issue is the rain. There's very heavy rain over the target, which is naturally obscuring the target from view. We've got some uncoordinated Dutch bombers coming in and doing no damage. 1, 2, 5, all coming in kind of piecemeal. That one did a little bit of damage. 5 of them inflicted 12 casualties, bombing from 5,000 feet. We've got 3 Warhawks and 7 139 WH-3s, inflicting another 13 casualties. Another lone 139 WH-3. 8 Blenheim 4s out of Singapore, again dropping bombs in heavy rain, doing no damage. We also sent our biplanes in, the Wildebeest and the Swordfish. So you can see here the Wildebeest are dropping 2 500-pound bombs each. No damage for those guys. These 14 Wildebeest do 12 casualties. So again, you can tell here we're really not doing much in the way of damage to these guys. Unfortunately, he's escaping a lot, and I think that's primarily because of the fact that the weather just was not on our side. 6 B-17s, also doing no damage. Warhawks doing no damage. Maybe, hopefully at least all these bombs falling on them will make them fatigued and maybe drop their morale a bit. I think we've done probably around like 120 casualties. It's not nothing, but it's certainly not going to probably be enough to allow our troops to overrun them. Recon, Japanese aircraft at Nauru Island. More recon over China. Temporary flotation failing on the Destroyer Express. In addition to the Repulse, which we sent to South Africa, we sent a damaged destroyer, the British destroyer, the Express, out that way. Actually, the Express is more badly damaged than the Repulse, but the Repulse is still slower than the Express because destroyer and, battleship. Some missions are being canceled due to bad weather. Doing some recon again. Clark Field recon. Ocean Island recon. Chinese bombers going against the retreating troops. The Japanese are withdrawing from Yichang through some bad terrain, and you can see here we did 29 casualties to them. Hopefully they're out of supply, too, and are not in good shape. I don't know. I think there's a couple Chinese divisions there. Meanwhile, the Japanese also have some air units near, or actually some naval units near Miri. They may be finally making a play for the northern coast of Borneo. You can see our DO-24s attempted to attack their fleet, but they had some Claudes, A5M4 Claudes, intercept, which is the predecessor to the Zero, and also tells me there's probably a carrier there, because the Claude doesn't have the same range that the Zero does, so it can't fly cap from Vietnam. So that means that he's probably got a light or an escort carrier with this force near Miri on the northern tip of the island of Borneo. Meanwhile, some recon over Kuantan. You can see the Tarpon, the U.S. Submarine firing torpedoes at a Japanese troop ship near Antimanon. And we're going to fast forward through the anti-submarine warfare part, other than to say the Tarpon took some damage, 11 hits. So that may be something we've got to pull out. His anti-submarine warfare tactics somehow have been very effective. Mine have been very ineffective. I've got dedicated ASW groups doing nothing, and he's like crippled 5 or 6 of my subs. He's only sunk 1, but we constantly have our subs going to the yard because they're taking so much flippin' damage. You can see he's unloading troops at Nauru Island here, just to the west of Tarawa. About even casualties in the bombardment, and no casualties on the unload. So that'll do it with the air phase and the naval phase. Now we're into the ground phase, and the 3rd Japanese Division is here to the south of Nanjing. I have, 5 Chinese corps. None of these are actually even at like 50% of their strength, but they do outnumber the enemy 2-to-1. We outnumber them nearly 2-to-1 in guns, and I did order a assault, a shock attack to see if we can bloody these guys. I didn't know it was a division here. I thought it might be a brigade or a regiment trying to come to Chusin, but apparently it's a division. I had hoped if it was a brigade or a regiment, we might be able to shatter it. It starts with an attack value of 420, so this is a very strong force. I hope I don't get too badly bloodied. It's very clear terrain, which generally also favors the Japanese. Deliberate attack against the 48th Corps here near Sinyang. He's driving these guys back. And we lost about, 1,000 men here, 991 men. He lost 260, 44 squads destroyed on our part, 4 guns lost. Funafuti, interesting. The Ellis Islands here, he just landed on and took. We didn't have any troops there, but that'll give him a good recon base to recon Fiji. Meanwhile, our deliberate attack at Mersing doesn't appear to be doing much. The bombardment isn't dropping either of these guys' value, the 124th Infantry Battalion or the 2nd SNLF. The attacks are occurring now. The infantry battalion is down to 0, which kind of means it's not really going to do much damage. The SNLF force, however, still relatively strong at 34. It's like 20 below its stock. I think SNLF units are usually between 50 and 60 attack value. He lost 210 casualties, 2 squads destroyed, 19 disabled, 1 non-combatant disabled. We lost 341 men, 1 destroyed, 36 disabled, 3 non-com, and 2 engineers disabled. We lost more men, but the destroyed actually favors us, and that's the important part, because if I pull these troops back to Singapore, they'll regain a lot of these disabled squads with time and supplies, so I hope I've got time there. Meanwhile, you can see our shock attack going in here near Nanjing. Hopefully this goes well. You can see he was at 420 before the last bombardment. He started this fight, I think, at 406, and you can see these different Chinese corps are... Whoa! They are driving that assault value down on the Japanese, down to 250. 2-to-1 Allied assault odds, and the Japanese retreat. So they lost 170 attack value, nearly half their strength. 5,233 casualties versus 1,200 of ours. This is the biggest victory for us to date in China. We might have taken Yichang, but we lost like 50,000 men doing it. This was a lopsided victory for the Chinese here in central China. Maybe gives them a little bit of something to think about. It's hard for us to really do much in China. If a competent Japanese player will win in China relatively easily, but that little bloody repulse there, he's only got maybe like 12, 13, 14 divisions in all of China. We just ravaged one of them, nearly inflicted 50% casualties, 5,233 men killed, 101 combatant squads destroyed, 135 engineer squads destroyed, 8 engineers, 51 guns lost, 21 destroyed. That is a very devastating strike. That division is going to need a couple of weeks at least to replenish, and he's got to replenish 101 squads, 135 squads, 8 engineers, and 51 guns, or actually 21 guns, from his production stockpile. That's not nothing, guys. That's a considerable loss for the Japanese to need to be able to replace through their industry. Meanwhile, they're attacking at Nauru Island, which I have no doubt will fall. You can see here 2-to-1 attack, and Nauru does fall. So he has started to eliminate these islands here on his flank of his advance toward Fiji. Meanwhile, at Canton, our base force did decide to launch an attack against nothing, so we did retake the island of Canton. Between that and Baker, we now have kind of pushed the Japanese back a little bit and kind of threatening their eastern flank. They're securing their western flank, but we're pushing them back on their eastern flank. And I think that's going to do it for the turn, guys. So I'm going to pause here for a second. It's going to kick me out, and then I will catch you guys back at the end of the break. Overall, pretty happy with that turn. That Chinese attack really made that turn for us. I think it was a good result for us. And then the naval attacks early on, I think are they're small pinpricks, but over time, those pinpricks, death by 1,000 cuts. Until, though, I will catch you guys in literally a second. I'm just going to jump out, we'll get the combat results, and then we'll jump in and see what we're doing for this turn. All right, everybody, we're back into our turn here. We've just concluded the last turn, and it was a relatively quiet turn. We did have those ships sunk, the 2 Japanese cruiser mine layers and the transport. All told, a total of 37 victory points worth, and some nice experience gained, I believe, hopefully, by the ships involved. But really, yeah, I don't know, it's Christmas Eve. Really the one thing that kind of caught my eye was the fact that he's still flying sweeps over Singapore, and I've got 100 fighters at Singapore. The most we've seen in a turn is 16 zeros, 16 Oscars. I'm assuming he's got more than that, but maybe not that much more. I know zeros are kind of hard to come by for the Japanese. We haven't seen any in the Philippines. Maybe they transferred him over, but at the end of the day, if he's only running sweeps with 30 fighters, we've got 100 in play. We've got 38 more that we can call in from the Dutch East Indies. I think we're going to make a play to try and hit him in the nose and kind of maybe cause him to rethink things. I wasn't really sure that's the course I wanted to go, but I was discussing things in in Tortuga's Discord chat. He set up a channel for the game, and I figured, hey, listen, this is something that if we just let him continue to fly sweeps over Singapore, at some point he's going to start bombing Singapore. And if we don't have a cap up that first turn he bombs Singapore, he might shut the airbase down in one turn. If 100 bombers come over, flatten the base, we might lose 20 aircraft on the ground. So at some point, we've really got to get our aircraft up in the air and really establish ourselves over Singapore. It's been useful thus far that we haven't, because it's prevented our Air Force from being wiped out, which it very easily could have been wiped out by now. But, at some point, we're going to have to challenge the airspace there, and I feel like this turn is the right turn to do that. With that being said, real quick here, we're looking at Pearl Harbor. Our 2nd Regiment of troops that is headed for the Fiji line, if you will, is the 8th Marine Regiment, and that is on the way here. It just refueled, I believe, at Pearl Harbor the other turn. And these guys are moving at double time as quickly as we can get them to the Pago Pago region. They're going to unload at Pago Pago and will hopefully prevent the Japanese from driving anywhere south. I think right now we've got sufficient forces ashore at Pago Pago to prevent any immediate landing here, although we don't have enough supply. We do have some fast supply on the way, though, via this transport. And then we've now got a total of 244 assault value ashore at Fiji, and we've moved one of our brigades over to Nadi, so we've got 125 assault value at Nadi. Between Nadi and Fiji, we've got about 400 assault value. Now, that being said, I was talking to Tortuga Power the other day, and he was pointing out to me, not the New Zealanders here, but the Australian troops are almost all militias. So that's something we need to be mindful of, unfortunately. Actually, the other thing here is we can merge, I think, all 3 of these New Zealand battalions. If we all move them into Suva, we can reform the 8th New Zealand Brigade and actually have a full-blown brigade of New Zealand troops, which are regulars, I believe, as well, on the island of Fiji. So that would give us some efficiency bonuses. Meanwhile, also in the south here near Sydney, near Port Kemba, my intention is to embark the 45th Australian Battalion and the 4th Australian Light Anti-Aircraft Regiment. That's because I do believe he's going to make a play for Fiji in order to, he's going to bring the KB down probably. Last we saw, the KB was at Kwajalein. We don't have any recon over Kwajalein right now, because the bases that we had over here at Nauru was taken out, and Ocean Islands, Catalinas are not operational. So we have no recon over Kwajalein. But we did spot the KB there last turn. And so I want to make sure, listen, I mean, realistically, guys, if he brings the KB down to Fiji, we're probably going to lose the island. Most of our troops here, most of our assault value are militia. And at the end of the day, our ability to resist against 6 carriers pounding us, and presumably with naval bombardment as well, just not very good. But if we can shoot down 20 or 30 or 40 of his aircraft in the process, it might well be worth it. The more pilots of his that we kill, the more strain we put on his pilot training program, and the more immediate that he has to start pulling, crew members and experienced pilots in that he doesn't want to. So really my focus in this early war period is going to be to kill as many Japanese pilots as I can, because that's what we need to do to get control of the air. We've lost about 69 pilots ourselves. We do know that the Japanese have lost at least, well, there's fog of war here, but we estimate the Japanese to have lost 102 zeros so far. About half of that, I believe, was in the attack on Pearl Harbor, which did not go well for them. So, that presumably is 50 pilots right there. If they all crashed over Pearl Harbor, they're either captured, missing in action, or they're killed in action. So that's good. If we can do another 50 of these in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I think that'll really help us and go a long way to bleeding him out. Additionally, we've also destroyed about 100 bombers, the GM4s and GM3s, largely in operations around the Philippines. We have lost a fair number of pilots ourselves, but nothing like that. Actually, I think the Japanese, the total losses so far in the campaign, Japanese 351, Allies 310. So the Japanese have actually lost more aircraft than ours. Additionally, we are pulling the first, not the 1st Australian Army, we're pulling the 5th Coastal Artillery Regiment here. It's got militia infantry, but it's got 16 6-inch guns that we're going to be moving to Suva. And then we're also pulling the 18th Australian Battalion, and then we're using the Queen Mary to transport the 1st Australian Brigade, because if we move those units all to Fiji, then we can form an Australian Infantry Division, so we can have a full-blown New Zealand Brigade, an Australian Division, and get as many efficiency bonuses as we can to make sure that Fiji holds. I don't want to over-reinforce Fiji. I don't want to create sort of a Pyrrhic victory or defeat, but I do want to make sure that we bloody his nose as much as possible. So that's the main effort here at Fiji. I'm bringing in some aircraft also to Fiji. So I've got some 20 aircraft on board this transport here that are going to Fiji. I think it's like 11 F4Fs, and about 18 Dauntlesses. And then I've also got another 50 aircraft or so Dauntlesses, are they Devastators, and Buffaloes on board the carriers, which can transport themselves there. Additionally, oddly, I don't know why, but the troops that landed on Canton, they didn't land the whole force. You can see here, we only landed a fraction of the 111th United States Base Force unit, an engineering unit. We landed 36 infantry, 56 support troops, 4 guns, 1 vehicle. I don't know why we landed so little. We took the base. I guess it's good. I don't want to strand 1,700 troops here. A base force isn't ideal for holding against a counterattack. So, I don't know. I guess we'll just leave that there, and we'll move the rest of the base force to Fiji to help build up the defenses there. We've also moved forward our tanker down here, Task Force 117, the Fleet Oiler Bishopdale, which is down to 3,500 fuel, is going to be meeting up with this task force coming south, which actually has enough fuel, so maybe we won't meet with them. But we will need to meet with potentially Task Force 222, which is coming in at full speed, destination Suva with the 117th Infantry Regiment. I had planned to move that infantry regiment to Savi to retake the island right away, but given the unit that he has there, I'm not sure that's a good idea. They're in strategic mode. They'll probably get massacred. Yes, he probably won't have fortifications, but I really think reinforcing Savi's the better play. The Marines will reinforce Pago Pago, and then this base will kind of be redundant and useless for him. You know, his ability to bring supplies south to Savi when we've got bases all around it, presumably strengthened, it'll basically become a Wake Island and just a death trap for his soldiers. So you can see here Nauru Island fell. Ocean Island, if this is really moving west, will probably fall next turn if this is an infantry unit here. So he's strengthening his hold on the South Pacific up near Tarawa, Nauru Island, and Ocean Island. And in addition, he did send some troops, a small number of troops, down here to Funafute to take this base. No air capacity here, but he can fly float planes out of it. It's an atoll, and it really gets him in nice to get some good recon on both Savi and Fiji. So, or sorry, not Savi, Fiji and Pago Pago. So this is something we're going to have to deal with. I don't think there's anything we can do in the short term to really disrupt that. Our oil convoys are all coming into Perth. You can see here we've got, 43,000, 57,000, 63,000, 67, probably around 70,000 oil between all these cargo units that is unloading here at Perth, which already has 35,000 itself. It should transport via this rail line and then this rail and road line all the way to the East Coast to help fuel the Australian economy. And then we actually have quite a bit more coming in, 5,000 coming in here, 18,000 coming in here, 13,000 and 22,000 respectively. And then another 14,000 here, those tankers are heading north, 3,000 there. And then I think we just loaded a tanker up somewhere around here, 6,500 here coming from the Balkapin, We're going to try and pull the 55,000 fuel currently in the Balkapan out and see what we can do with that. With the taking of Miri, he's probably going to shut off our reinforcements to the Philippines. We're not sending reinforcement troops, but we have unloaded over 6,000 additional supply at Bataan to try and strengthen him. And we've got a unit here about to arrive at Bataan, the Task Force 112 with an AG, about to bring another 600 supply, and Task Force 62 with an armed merchant cruiser going to bring in another 1,600. So about another 2,000 supply coming into Bataan to really try and strengthen this position and make sure that these guys have enough food and supplies to last a long time. Meanwhile, our submarine force has formed a new cordon. We're getting a couple of these units here in the south into position. So if they do make a move west beyond either Miri or Brunei, where I'm assuming they're going to land some of these troops here very soon, then we'll be able to have submarines in place to deal with that. The Prince of Wales is slowing down a little bit, so we're moving. That is not its arc. There we go. We're going to slow it down to mission speed. It's taken about 9 additional float damage since we left. We're already out of range of his aircraft. Submarines are the only threat now, and I'm hoping we're past the real threat there. We'll see. But this is my goal is to slow it down a little bit so we can get it off map and get it repaired. Speaking of getting off map and off repaired, we've got the Repulse, I believe. No, it's not there yet. Is this the Repulse? Yes, it is. We got the Repulse has taken no additional flood damage, actually. 20 flood damage, 42 express damage, float damage on the Express, the destroyer there. So these guys are heading west and are going to be heading to Cape Town here very soon. Not a lot to report in the Asia theater. I didn't really do much with China this turn. These fighters of ours really didn't do anything at Wenchao. We'll see if we get another chance to intercept these bombers maybe going after our soldiers here. This is where the battle was that we fought and drove back the Chinese division into Nanqing. And we're building up fortifications at Chengchu, Luoyang, and Tsingtao. In addition to that, we're moving troops around near Yichang, and we're also pulling these troops in Xinyang out. We're moving all of these troops, all 1,300 assault value in the city that we just took, to Nanyang. I think my main intent here is to hold sort of a double defensive position here at Qingchao and Luoyang, potentially falling back to Luoyang. This position could theoretically be flanked, although I'm not sure if he will do that or not, and then he wouldn't have to shock attack the city, but it is a level 3 fort. What I'd actually prefer to do here is to fall out of Qingchao, however, and stack up in Luoyang, and Tsingtao, and also along this rail line. So we kind of form a line here in the north. The rail line's got really good terrain to help defend. So does Xiangtao. Luoyang doesn't, though. That's the main reason I haven't fallen back. Plus, it's only a level 2 fort. But it really guards the valleyway to this entrance up here to Xi'an. So what I'd like to do is put strong forces in Luoyang and in Nanyang to block the approaches to Xi'an in the north. Meanwhile, abandoning Xinyang. And then in the sort of central area, Yichang would be the first defensive position, and then the second line in the defense would be Chengeth, which would then form up sort of through Changsha and all these other bases here behind these rivers, would sort of form up our southern defensive line. That's the plan for China. And then Singapore. We might as well get to Singapore. That's where I'm going to be making the biggest play. So I'm not going to bomb Mersing again this turn, mainly because I'm not going to have any fighters to escort. And I bombed it last turn. I expect he'll probably throw a fighter sweep or screen or something up over Mersing. So I think a bombing mission there is a bad idea unless we have strong escorts. I don't plan to send strong escorts because I'm going to send 80% of my 100 fighters at Singapore. If we filter here, we've got 100 fighters currently ready out of a total of 112. We've got 26 H-81s, 11 P-40Es, 9 P-40Bs, 6 P-40Es, 3 P-40Es, so this is 9, this is 20 P-40Es, and 26 H-81s. The H-81 is basically the P-40B. So between the P-40B and the H-81, we've got 35 P-40Bs, we've got 20 P-40Es, and we've got about 45 Buffalo fighter crap. And we're going to scramble 80 of these guys up here to be on constant combat air patrol over Singapore, because I think he's going to send his 12 or 16 Zeros down, his 12 or 16 Oscars down, and then we can potentially jump those guys and maybe give him a bit of a bloody nose and prevent him from just sort of walking all over us. In addition to that, we're going to throw 22, or actually 38 fighters out from the Dutch East Indies. These are going to be on max effort, 100% cap. So we've got the 38 fighters coming out from here, the 80 fighters out of Singapore. That'll give us a fighter strength of around 118 to deal with presumably about 30 to 40 enemy fighters. Hopefully the 3-to-1 odds gives us a good chance to really give the Japanese a bloody nose without losing too much in the way of our own Zeros. And that's the plan, guys. So heavy fighter sweeps and actions over Singapore to try and clear the sky of Japanese fighters before they get too bold to start bombing us, moving the Prince of Wales at a little bit slower speed to the west, continuing to pull supplies out of the Dutch colonies in the Dutch East Indies, continue to pour supplies in as best we can to the Philippines here, to Bataan, to try and get its strength up. In the South Pacific, we're continuing to reinforce Fiji, really at above anything else, and we're flanking most of these ships in to get them here more quickly, but it is burning a lot of fuel, and it is stretching our logistical capabilities. We've got about 15,000 or so fuel on the way via these 2 fleet oilers, but we've also got 3 carriers that need that oil. Meanwhile, we've got other logistical operations taking place to bring supplies to Pago, to Christmas Island, to Palmyra, and at some point soon I'll also be pulling out some of these Marine Defense Battalions and reinforcing Johnston Island, Palmyra Island, Christmas Island, and that's probably about it. Pago's going to get the regiment, Suva's going to get the regiment, so that probably does it for that. And that's the situation, guys. That's currently the situation. I know you guys asked to see the aircraft production pool, so I'm not going to go into too much detail other than, the Allies don't get to control their own production, their own manufacturing. So I'm kind of stuck with whatever I'm given. We do have 20 Dauntless SBD-3s in the pool here. All the gray stuff is R&D. We've got, if I'm searching by rate, I think, is that really what it is? I thought the P-40 was like 30. Why am I not seeing any fighters here? The F-3F, 0 rate for any of those fighters. What the frick? P-40E. Why does it say rate production 0? Or no, it's here. Replacement rate is 35 for the P-40. Can we filter by this? A lot of these aircrafts aren't on the way yet. So the P-40E has the biggest production buff. It's basically like a little bit over 1 and a fraction, 1 and like a tenth, 1 and whatever the math is. But around 1 and a tenth fighter per day for the P-40 Warhawk. The Buffalo is the second highest produced aircraft. We've got 20 of those in pool. I rather would not use them. The P-39D Airacobra is also something that we can keep an eye on. We've got a bunch of those on the East Coast, but some of them can be moved to the Pacific, so we'll have to consider that. Some recon aircraft, some Russian aircraft, some Hudsons. The F-3F only gets 8 per month. There's only 2 in pool, so that's not a very high producing item. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the situation where we are right now. I can dive into more detail in the industry and the stats. I'm trying to get AE Tracker working for me. It keeps telling me that it can't run a 32-bit system and a 64-bit operating system, so I'm not sure how to get that running, but I would like to use the War in the Pacific tracker to kind of help share the supply situation. Because Australia, if you don't turn its economy off, can really burn through fuel quickly. But if you do leave it on, it can create a lot of supply, but you have to provide a lot of fuel to Australia, and that's what I'm trying to do via the Dutch East Indies. But anyway, guys, if there's going to be a big battle this turn, it's probably going to be around Singapore. We've got about 118 fighters committed to be on cap this turn. We're standing everybody else down, so the base administration is as efficient as can be, and we'll see what happens there. In the meantime, guys, I hope you continue to enjoy the series. Let me know your thoughts. You can feel free, and I'll throw a link in the description to jump over to Tortuga Power. He's another YouTuber's Discord channel. He set up I spent a lot of time over there, and frankly, I've been a little bit too lazy to organize a Discord myself. It'll probably happen sooner rather than later, but I haven't done it yet. and Tortuga set up a channel over there for this channel, and really I think the goal is mainly to use it for War in the Pacific talks. So feel free to jump over there. I'll throw a link in the description, and you can participate in the discussions over there. But until next time, guys, we'll see how this Grand Gambit works. Hopefully we can destroy like 10 of his fighters, maybe only lose 4 or 5 of our own, and teach him a bit of a lesson. But we won't know until we do it. So until next time, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.